Welcome back to another Q&A where we are doing a marketing special. So all of your questions on marketing answered in this very video. Let's get into it. So if we're meeting for the first time, my name is David Winter and I do run a marketing or video agency up here in Newcastle in the UK. We've been doing this for a number of years and I've been working on content, marketing, all sorts of things for brand and content online for what was me being probably about 15 years now, something like that. So a long time in the game. And we're going to go through a load of frequently asked questions, some of your questions on marketing, how to get the best results, how much should it actually cost, how long should you be doing marketing for, all that good stuff. So let's get into the first question. So question number one, how do you actually define marketing? So there's a lot of broad terms. You have marketing, of course, you have sales, actually getting things over the line. But marketing for me is any kind of activity that is actually trying to communicate yourself as a brand, as a business to your audience. So a lot of the time we think of actual advertising, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, all that kind of stuff. But this right now that you're watching is technically marketing as well. Marketing myself as a business owner, as a brand, as a video agency owner. And so there are so many things that fall within marketing. So there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it. How are you at all points throughout your customer journey communicating yourself as a brand or business, or actually raising awareness to your customer in the first place? Question number two, is there a golden rule in marketing? Probably here, what is the one major bit of advice that I guess can be applied right across the board? For me, it is probably always thinking with your customer in mind first, forever and always. We always talk about a lot of value in marketing, value in content. What value can you give to your audience, to your potential customers? And Gary Vee does sum that up best with the jab, 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 right hook, provide value, provide value, provide value, and then ask for the sale. And you do always want to think about your customers first. Whether you're creating an advert, and therefore you need to think of what will my customer resonate with, what are they actually looking for, what do they want, what problem are we solving for them? And then if it is more general content marketing and kind of, videos like this, for example, or any kind of content that you might create for YouTube or social media, you want to think about, if it's organic content, what are we interrupting them from, first of all? So if you're thinking about creating, adverts or content on Instagram, what are we actually trying to do? What are they likely to be watching at that point? What platform are they on? What can we actually do to hold their attention? What can we give them? What can we provide them? A lot of the time that is entertainment, that is valuable, that is education. That's where you want to begin when you're thinking about any piece of content or advertisement that you are creating. And truthfully, for me on this channel, trying to build myself a bit of a personal brand as a business owner or as a small video agency owner, this very video that you're watching, hopefully you are someone that is wanting to learn about marketing, improve your marketing, maybe just start marketing and content and video production altogether. And so this particular video is helping people like you in that space. And that's what we've thought about first when we've decided to do a marketing special of this Q&A. Number three, are there any best platforms to create content on? Now, my answer over time has changed with this. I used to always give the Gary Vee answer of a million pieces of content on every single platform, every single day. I do agree with that if you are operating at scale, if you're a big business. It is absolutely impossible. Do not kid yourself that you can do that if you are a one-man band, a freelancer, or even a small business. We have a team of 4 now, and even still, we're going to struggle to do that at scale every single day. More specifically, however, you want to think about where your audience actually is. So if your audience, if you are B2B, the go-to tends to be LinkedIn, although that's not always the direct, easy answer that you think that is. But you might want to focus your time on LinkedIn. You might want to think about reaching a broader audience, but creating real depth on something like YouTube. Or if you are trying to interrupt people in a social setting, i.e., when I say social setting, I mean social media. So, Instagram, TikTok, Reels, those kind of doom scrolling activities that most people do. Are you trying to interrupt them there? If so, that's where you obviously want to create your content for. So there's no one size fits all answer to this. You have to think about you, your brand, your message, your product, your placement, and also, or firstly, as we said earlier, your audience. Where are they at? Where are they going to resonate with? And what is going to have the best impact? I think my advice on this one is to actually maybe pick one platform or a couple of platforms and try and focus really, really heavily and execute really, really well on them. Even still today, I try and do probably too much, still try to put out all the same videos on all the same platforms or across all the platforms. And it's not always going to work, where sometimes I sit and sort of deliberate things and think, would we actually be better if we just focused 100% of our time on YouTube, for example, or 100% of our time on LinkedIn, or maybe it's 80% and put a bigger emphasis somewhere. So it's probably trial and error as well as anything else, but do not feel, unless you are a huge company, in which case you want to take the Gary Vee advice and you probably want to have conversations with Gary Vee and not me. But if you're a small business, one-man band, freelancer, that kind of thing, pick a platform, execute really well on it, and see the results from that. Question number 4 is the best ways to create content. What is the best way to create content? Now, again, not a one-size-fits-all kind of answer or approach to this. The best way to create content is always with a system, with a process, with things in place, and a bit of a checklist, if you like, of the things that you're going to answer yourself or answer for your audience. Who are we actually helping with this? Who are we wanting to see this video, watch this video, this piece of content, read this blog? Who are we trying to help? What problem are we solving? That's probably where you want to start. Then you want to think about how do we effectively do that in terms of budget as well as time. So bulk recording can be a huge way to save costs and be a bit more efficient and get regular kind of results with your content in terms of the final output. So for example, we've now got this setup behind me here. The colors might change behind me of these lights, but this setup works pretty well for us, so we know where we're at with that. And then actually getting the content distributed. Again, we want to think about which platforms we're actually putting them on. But in terms of the best way to create that content, once you've distributed it, you've got to look at the analytics, because that is then going to tell you how you create the next batch of content, how you improve your content. Maybe it's what you change altogether, or maybe it's also what you keep the same. It tells you what's working, what's not. And that is the best way to create content, is actually everything that sits around pressing record on the camera and recording. Question number 5, is marketing expensive? Now, my short answer to this is that it should never be seen as an expense, because it is not a cost, it is an investment. However, it can be expensive if you get it wrong. Now, most people think about doing marketing wrong. They think of sort of big scandals or storylines where an advert has gone out or a piece of content and it's created a lot of controversy or a lot of backlash, and people have disagreed with it, rightly or wrongly, whatever those stories may be. That's what people think of marketing going wrong. The truth is, marketing can go wrong quietly. Marketing can go wrong for 3 years and not get the results, but you've paid somebody or a team a full-time salary for, let's say, 3 years, and you've had no results. Well, if you paid a social media team or a content team 100 grand a year or 200 grand a year in salaries, and you've done that for 3 years, you've just cost yourself £500,000. And if you haven't got results, then that is a great example of marketing being a very big expense with no upside. So what you want to do is make sure your marketing is good. I suppose that is always subjective, but your analytics is going to give you the objective, right or wrong, good or bad, tell you the numbers and the return on your investments there. But marketing's also a long game. Marketing does take time. Marketing's not going to be something where you can always put in a certain amount of money and see what you get back. That is a little bit more of advertising and what's called ROAS, return on advertising spend. There where you can see the really kind of like hardcore black and white numbers to go, we've spent this much and we've made this much back. Marketing is a little bit more long term. It's really quite difficult sometimes to actually see where money has gone or kind of justify spends in certain areas. It is a little bit more pie in the sky, longer term thinking. And when you do look at big brands out there, Louis Vuitton, for example, I don't know why they're the first that come to mind, but a Louis Vuitton, what do you think of when you think of that brand? Or when you see that brand, what do you think of? And then try and think of how much money has gone into the marketing for you to think that. You can't possibly imagine what that number is. One, because you don't know, but I can also guarantee you it's a hell of a lot more than you'd ever think. Question number 6, marketing on a budget. What advice is there for marketing with a low budget? It's difficult. You do have to be always creative, no matter what the budget. You want a storyline or something that compels your audience to take action or to think of you in a certain way or paint the picture that you want as a brand and as a business. But to do that on a budget can be difficult. It comes back to thinking from the very start everything that you need to think about and what you can do to eliminate any mistakes or things going wrong or avoid wasting budget. So a lot of my advice now is actually people create things on a budget, on a shoestring budget, even if you have to film it on your phone and you're creating content that way. And what budget you do have, you might actually want to put into the advertising, the promotion of that content that has cost you very little to create. So let's just say really easy number. Say you've got a budget of £1,000, no more than £1,000. Well, are you going to work with us as a video agency for that £1,000? Well, you might be able to if we can film things, very, very quickly, turn things around quickly. That's going to be the case for most video agencies. What are you going to get out of that for that £1,000? Probably not a huge amount. Would you have been better off trying to create something funny, engaging, entertaining, valuable, educational on your phone and spending £1,000 advertising that? Probably. In that, in that absolute concrete example between A and B, you're probably going to go with the cheap option and spend £1,000 advertising that. And that became my advice for a lot of small businesses these days. But at the same time, it's becoming more difficult to put that amount of money into Facebook ads and still see results. The cost of advertising now is becoming absolutely ridiculous. I remember back in the day, literally spending, when I was like 15-year-old, literally spending £10, 10 quid on a video of me playing drums. And if I remember rightly, it was Bruno Mars. Remember when, what was it called? 24 Karat, 24 something magic? Remember that song? There we go. Back in the day, I remember posting that video, drum cover, 10 quid I spent on the advertising, right? It was probably what was left of my weekly wage as an apprentice at that point. And I can't even remember what the numbers were now. I got over 200,000 views, 1 million impressions on the video, 200,000 views. Ridiculous numbers. You couldn't get that today. Bear in mind, this is 10 years later. You just couldn't get that kind of results today. You probably would need £1,000 for those numbers. So you want to think about the platforms. How can you perform really well within those platforms? Obviously, TikTok at the moment is the main player for that really good reach on organic content. And that's what you want to think about. What platforms can we do really, really well on, play to the strengths of that platform, rather than kind of waste, if you've got minimal budget, on trying loads of different stuff or trying to get as good or as big a video or a marketing piece of content for that money and then having no budget to actually distribute it and get it out there. Hopefully that makes sense. And the main point that I need to make, I can't believe I haven't actually given it in the first instance in that answer, is creativity. You have to be creative with your marketing, especially if you're on a budget. It actually doesn't matter what the budget is, you have to be creative. But if you've got no budget, you have to be double creative. You've got to really think, what is going to stand out here? What is really going to get some traction, if that's what we're needing in terms of PR and awareness and things? What's really going to get the ball rolling with just the idea that we have? There's some really amazing examples that we've seen of this. Guerrilla marketing is one of those things that can be done very cheaply, but kind of very effective. I feel like a lot of the time now, the sort of real world pranks or guerrilla marketing that we kind of see, it's almost the reaction, filming it, whether it is on your phone, but it's almost the reaction that people have in the real world and then putting that video up online. That seems to do so well. Obviously very effective for the people that have been involved in or part of unknowingly that prank or that guerrilla marketing. Some amazing examples of really, really cheap marketing campaigns. Dan Kelsall on LinkedIn, someone that I've followed for a while, really great marketing campaigns that they've done for like 500 quid or less. So I'd recommend you check him out. Some really good examples that he's given, and he's actually broken down the results that they got from that, good and bad, ones that have worked and ones that haven't. But absolutely creativity. What is the maddest thing that you can do for 500 quid? That is probably going to have to be your marketing campaign on a budget. Question number 7, how much money should you spend on marketing? Now, with a lot of these questions in this video, it's actually a whatever suits you kind of response. There is not a one size fits all, and how much money should you spend on marketing is exactly the same. When it comes to marketing and your budgets and how much you want to put in or how much you think you can put in or should, the golden rule that I always like to follow is how much can you afford to lose if it all goes to zero? How much money can you set aside where if you spent it all on marketing and you lost it all, think about gambling in a casino, because marketing or advertising can be a little bit like that. think about how much would you be willing to spend, see it go to zero and the business still be okay. That is where your marketing budget kind of needs to sit for the majority of the time. Now, you also want to have a look at your actual analytics within your business, right? Really sit and analyze your business. Look at your gross profits on your product. So let's say you sell a product for 100 quid and really easy numbers, let's say it costs you 50 quid to produce. Now that doesn't mean you've got 50 quid to then acquire that customer, because you have £50 on your cost of sales. You sell it at 100, £50 cost of sales, it leaves you with 50. We've also got your net operations as a business, which let's just say is 40. And so then you're left with £10 or 10% out of that product. And so you only have 10%, ideally less, obviously, otherwise you'd be left with no money. You want to try and get about 5% of that cost to acquire that customer. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. That's what you want to think about in your business. Loads of people are going to spend loads of money on marketing, and then at the end of the year wonder why they've lost money. They might have done loads of revenue, gained loads of customers, got loads of people on their website and done loads of good conversions and loads of sales. But it's actually cost them more money than they can afford, more, if we look at that example, than the £50 they had in their gross profits. It might be costing them 50, 60, 70 pounds to acquire that customer. Now I can really talk in great detail about this example because that is what I went through as a business, starting or trying to sell a load of racing merchandise, motorsport merchandise online. We were actually making the t-shirts ourselves, and it was costing us about £20 per t-shirt because we were right on the lower threshold. If we created more, it would have brought the cost per t-shirt down, but it was actually costing us £20 for the first few thousand t-shirts that we had printed, which meant we were selling them for a measly 25, so £5 profit, which is not very good. So it was costing us 20 to make, we were selling it for 25, it was costing us £17, so it was costing us £37 to create and sell a t-shirt. We were then selling it for 25, and so we were minus £12 on every t-shirt that we sold. I think I just about got there with the maths. I used to be really good on the numbers around on Countdown, but ever since I left school, that seems to have let me down. Question number 8, how long should you do marketing for? Now the answer, realistically, and this is a one-size-fits-all, is forever and always. You do not want to stop doing marketing. Now a small business or a freelancer, and I can relate to this one and speak firsthand, I would do loads of marketing, get loads of work in, and then the marketing would stop. As soon as the clients came in, as soon as a video came in, you know, and the work began, the marketing stopped. And that was a really big challenge because as soon as I had all the work come in, if I'd split that in half and rejected half of the work or spread that work over a longer period of time, say we had 3 months worth of work, but I did it at 6 months, so that half of my time could be spent on marketing. Realistically, that's a more sensible approach, but I just couldn't do it. Financially, I couldn't do it. I could not afford to wait that long for invoices, for the work to begin and then invoices to be paid. And so the marketing just stopped. And then that meant, after that 3 months worth of work was done, I had 3 months of no work and 3 months of trying to, you know, grind the marketing out again and kind of build things back up and then get the work in. And it was rinse and repeat, and it was a really bad place to be. And it's a really bad place to be for any business. So you want to get to a point, and it's not going to happen immediately, but you want to get to a point where your marketing is just 24/7. It is 365, and even when you're busy and when you're working and when you've got loads of work in or products to create and sell, the marketing does not stop. That is the golden rule. Question number 9, what results should you get from marketing and how do you analyze? Now, this is a really difficult one to answer and a really difficult one to actually do in the real world. The truth is, with general kind of content marketing, how do you actually analyze that? Let's take my YouTube channel, for example. In fact, we'll take all 3. So this one here, David Winter Business. How do I actually analyze this? Well, I can analyze the watch time and the views and all that within YouTube itself. But does that relate to my business much? Well, probably not, or I'm really going to struggle to see the connections unless someone really anecdotally over the phone says, oh, I found your YouTube channel and kind of I've booked you from there. So that's going to be a little bit difficult. Then when it comes to something like my drum channel, for example, and Affinity Racing, let's look at both of them because they are both education. I can only really loosely measure, we've done more videos, we've got more views, and actually the ad revenue has increased. That's a little bit more solid, black and white. in terms of sponsorships, for example, if we got some of that through on Affinity Racing, in terms of merchandise sold, you can kind of only relate that to the views, and realistically, you know, the more the views grow, the more potentially that is going to convert. But it is still very difficult to pinpoint that to, oh, that video sold that amount of t-shirts. You can have all the trackable links, the Google UTMs, we do all of that, of course, but it's still really, really difficult. Especially, for example, you know, someone could watch your channel, let's say, for 2 years and not buy a thing. And one person could watch one video of your channel and buy 10 t-shirts from your merch store immediately. Where's the difference in the correlation? It's really, really difficult to get into the psyche of your customer on an individual kind of basis. So only when you're actually really at scale can you start to see those numbers link up. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, and I don't know if it really does answer the question, but until you're really putting money into direct advertising, seeing a return on advertising spend, tracking that conversion, how much they've sold, and in a basket on a website, it's always going to be super difficult to manage and analyze your marketing. I've talked about on previous videos being made redundant from my marketing role. In fact, our entire social media team was made redundant from our marketing role. And yes, I am still bitter about that, and it still gets me raging every single day, because what we had there was really good opportunities for really good content, but they just couldn't analyze. And we as a social media team struggled to really say, this is the value that we are bringing to you as a business. This is the value that we are bringing to our customers. This is the value that our collective salaries is the return on investment. And we struggled to show that, and then the management team struggled to see that. And so ultimately we were made redundant. Really frustrating time, but I understand now why that decision was made. And sadly, that is the decision that's being made across a lot of businesses. They hire somebody in to do marketing, they try marketing, it doesn't work, i.e. they don't see their business explode by the following week or the end of the month. And so they are very short-sighted, or not looking at things in a big enough picture to be able to go, yeah, let's build this up over time, let's really work hard on this. It's a difficult task to build a brand in marketing. And then people get let go. And they work with freelancers and they let the freelancers go. And they work with an agency and then they let the agency go. And it's just a vicious cycle. And you see that happening loads, but it's because people do not have, or business owners or marketing departments or CEOs do not have a real grasp on how to truly measure marketing. And that's the reality, no one does. Final question number 10, should I do marketing myself or use companies? Now again, this answer is going to vary depending on who you are, what your business is. If you're just a freelancer and you're by yourself or a very small team, it's probably going to make sense that you try and do the marketing yourself. You just got to be really, really good at kind of dedicating that time, that effort, that energy, that money as well. And making sure, as we said earlier, that you do not stop that marketing at any point throughout the year. If you are a bigger company or a big corporation, you may start looking at agencies and companies, and we certainly work with plenty of businesses like that to produce, really specialist type of videos and content. But ultimately, I'm against video agencies. Now, I run a video agency, and my advice to any client that we work with is, you should be doing this yourself. You should have somebody, if you can afford to do it, a dedicated in-house team that is doing your marketing. Now, you might get us in for the real specialist stuff, but you don't want to be working with a video agency or a marketing agency to do the generalized, all-round marketing. That is just a recipe for disaster. They're never really going to truly understand your business. There will be companies out there that will be experts in a particular field and all of that, of course, but I just feel like the results are never really there. And we talk about the gaps between your product sold or your service, your cost of sales, and the very little margin that you have to actually acquire those customers. You do not want to be losing that margin or using up that margin, that tiny little amount that you do have, that 5%, let's say, paying the profits of another business. That just, to me, just makes absolutely no sense. And again, I run a video agency. I want people to come to us for videos, but that is always the advice that I will give. However, it's caveated with a huge caveat. That makes sense? With a huge caveat, I always say, you have to have the right marketing strategy. If you don't, then you need to go to a specialist, to an agency, to a video agency, to a marketing agency, whatever it is. If you are not going to be able to have the ideas, the execution, then you shouldn't be hiring someone in-house, because going back to myself in a social media role, that was the problem we had. We were a social media team. We sort of like did the doing, if you like, of the social media and distributing and posting stuff out, but there was no direction, there was no ideas, there was no clarity, no imagination, no creativity. And so what is a social media team going to do with that? What is your marketing team going to do with that? If there's no ideas, no clarity, no North Star that everybody's working towards with your content and marketing, it's never going to work. So it's a slightly long-winded answer. It's caveated on so many different levels, but hopefully that helps you make the decision for yourself in your own business. And with that, that has been our Q&A with a business owner for our marketing special. Really hope you've enjoyed this one. Really hope you found it useful. And if you have done, or you've enjoyed any other videos on the channel, please do hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified when new videos come out. We've got plenty more on the way behind the scenes as well for our projects with our clients, more Q&As, as well as loads of lessons that I've learned through business, sharing my insight and documenting my journey throughout hopefully the next 50, 60, 70 years, who knows, while we grow all the businesses and brands that we want to online. So with that, hopefully I will see you in the next video, but make sure to drop any questions that you have on all things business in the comments and I will answer them in the next video.